Hello friends, Frogopolis here, and welcome to part 4 of my look at the Planet of the Apes franchise. Today we'll be looking at the live action show from 1974, but first I would like to make a small segue to talk about Roddy McDowall, who is not only in this series, but also in several Planet of the Apes films. I feel in part 1 of my look at the Planet of the Apes franchise, I didn't really take time to look at the actors, and the more I watched the series, the more I noticed that Roddy McDowall was in pretty much everything. I also can't forget about Kim Hunter and Maurice Evans, who played Zyra and Dr. Zaius respectively, and starred in multiple Planet of the Apes films. Overall, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about my appreciation for everyone who helped make this universe come to life, because I think it's still fascinating to this day and a wonderful achievement in practical effects. I was also delighted to find out that Roddy McDowall was in another favorite classic of mine, Fright Night, and its sequel. While mostly known for his acting and voice work, he also directed a movie called Tam Lin back in 1970, and I'm actually playing the soundtrack to it right now. He also had a hand in film preservation efforts back when it was not common, and I guess I'm saying all of this to say that the more I learned about him, the more I admired him as a person and an actor. Thank you for all your great acting roles, Roddy McDowall, and rest in peace. And with that, let's go on to the live-action television show from 1974. We begin with some poor old guy getting chased up a tree from a dog at the command of a small ape. As this is happening, we hear something crash off in the distance, and they both separately go to see what's happening. The young ape goes off to tell the others, while the human goes to go investigate the crashed spaceship. He's able to get the hatch open, and when he goes inside, he sees our 3 astronauts. Our 2 astronauts. So this is one hell of a sight to come across, and he has to think quickly, so he starts dragging out the 2 unconscious astronauts and tries to haul them to safety because he knows that more apes are going to come back soon. And thankfully he's able to get the last one away just as the apes are arriving. The apes are obviously pretty confused by what's going on and gotta go investigate. Right off the bat, I've gotta say, the makeup looks really good for a TV show. Obviously they're working with a lower budget, and yeah, it looks good. This is one hell of a find, so they have to send out the message that they found this spacecraft to Dr. Zaius. Back with our humans, our old guy has successfully dragged off the 2 astronauts into his little own hidey hole and is working on trying to get them conscious again. While he's out getting supplies, our 2 astronauts wake up. Here we meet Alan Verdon and Pete Burke, played by Ron Harper and James Naughton. They're obviously pretty confused about what's going on, and they learn a little bit from the guy who saved them. His name's Pharaoh, and he's never seen 2 humans that quite look like them before. He goes to go get them a change of clothes so they don't stand out as much, and he warns them about the apes right before he leaves. Now, having just woken up from being unconscious in their spacecraft, they're probably pretty confused about being warned about the apes, and they don't take it too seriously, so they leave the hidey hole and are immediately shot at. Apes with guns on horseback? What is this, some kind of Planet of the Apes? After this rude welcoming, we go to a scene where Dr. Zaius is talking to Best Boy Galen. Galen is looking to be Dr. Zaius' assistant, but this conversation gets sidetracked after a messenger shows up and Dr. Zaius finds out that a spacecraft has crashed into the Earth. Wow, that was hard to say. Back with Pete and Alan, they're showing us their ripped bods, and they're learning more about what this world is all about, and how humans are second-class citizens. While they're talking, Pharaoh also mentions a storybook he has, so he shows them the book, and it is an ancient book from the year 2500. And if this, Alan and Pete find out that they've been on Earth this whole time. And that's just wacky. So now we're back with Zeus and Galen, and now General Urko is here. This isn't important to anything, but General Urko was played by Mark Lenard, who also played Spock's father in the original Star Trek series. I just thought that was neat. During the conversation between the three, we get a very interesting bit of story where we find out that 10 years prior, 3 astronauts came down to Earth much like our 2 protagonists, but these astronauts were killed. This is all news to Galen, who always saw stories as this as fairy tales. We also learn that Zeus wants to capture the humans to interrogate and study them, while General Urko just wants to kill them, so they don't spread around their goddamn smarts. Galen reacts to this news of interest and curiosity. Zeus sends Galen and General Urko to go find the 2 humans. Back with the humans, they're still trying to process what's happening, and they realize that if they can get back to the ship, they may be able to find some useful equipment. Pharaoh causes a distraction, and they gotta go inside the ship. Pete and Alan get back to the ship, and when they look inside, they see it's destroyed, which isn't much of a surprise. But when they see the intact console, they see it says that they're in the year 3085. But oh no, it was a trap this whole time, and Pharaoh gets shot, and Pete and Alan are captured by the Apes. While he's there, Galen notices a bag holding the book that Pharaoh had, showing the long distant past of 2500. Sensing its importance, he hides it amongst himself. Later that day, Alan and Pete are already thinking of their escape, and Galen is learning more from the book he just found, and he's becoming curiouser and curiouser. He had also taken note of the kindness and humanity that Alan and Pete showed for someone they had just met. Galen goes to talk to Pete and Alan, and they tell him that yes, they're from the future, but also the past, and that the world used to be a much different place. This starts to destroy Galen's little world, and he has a hard time dealing with it. The next day, Alan and Pete are put into Ape Court, where they're put on trial to see what happens to them next. General Urko, in an attempt to convince the Ape Council that humans are dangerous, had stolen some past tech that Dr. Zeus had been collecting over the years, which is a small bomb, and he uses it to demonstrate that, hey, humans created this dangerous thing, what else can they create? Meanwhile, Alan, acting as his and Pete's lawyer, is spitting straight facts.
Do you believe humans and apes are equal?
In this world or ours?
In any world.
I don't know about any world. But I believe that all intelligent creatures should learn to live and work with each other as equals.
Despite General Urko's effort, Dr. Zeus decides to keep the 2 alive so he can question them and learn more to prevent them from making weapons like this in the future. So Alan and Pete are put in jail for now, and Galen is still having his crisis of faith, if you will. He starts to come to reason and think, hey, why aren't apes and humans living coexistently in peace? And Dr. Zeus is having none of this. Galen goes to see our 2 prisoners, and starts to learn more about humans and ask more questions. While they're talking, Alan and Pete shoot their shot and say, hey, why don't you help us get out of here? Galen isn't super into this idea at the moment, but he does think it'll be cool to talk to them again, and he agrees to come back at night to chat some more. But that's not the only thing that's happening. General Urko has given orders to his men to kill the 2 humans at night, and they do this by leaving the prison door open so they'll try to escape and he can shoot them. When Galen comes back that night to chat, he sees what's happening and starts to think that something is up, so he lays low. Pete and Alan notice that the door's open and naturally go leave, but they also sense that it might be a trap, so they're pretty careful about it. And they're right, because there's a gorilla right out there with a gun to shoot them. Luckily for them, Galen sees what's happening and bravely charges at the gorilla to stop them from killing Alan and Pete. In the scuffle, he accidentally shoots the gorilla. So Pete and Alan do get away, but now Galen's in prison. And Dr. Zaius goes to see what's up, and here we get Galen dropping some mad truth on Dr. Zaius.
Do you realize that possession of such a book alone is punishable by death?
Why, Zaius? Why should truth be against the law?
Now, one thing you're going to find out quickly is that Pete and Alan are badasses, and they come up with a plan to save their chimp friend. They get Dr. Zaius' location, break into his house, and kidnap him using one of the bombs he found. When confronting Dr. Zaius tells them that he has no regrets in what he is doing, and talks about the death and destruction that humans brought in the past, and also strongly hints that it's humans that caused what is happening today. Of course, this is the narrative of violence, fear, and paranoia that we see time and time again in the series, and is depressingly still prevalent to today. The idea that instead of fixing the problems of the past, they'll simply wipe it all out and do their best to destroy it. Zaius is taken back to the prison and used to get back inside. Once inside, Pete and Alan tie up Zaius and the guard and have to use the tiny explosive to blow up the door that Galen's behind of. All three of them escape, and now Galen's a monkey fugitive. They go back to the ship to see if there's anything they can get now that they have a little more time to search around. Alan is able to find a thingamabobber that has information about the ship on it, and he hopes to use that one day to help build a new one. Urko and Dr. Zaius had chased them down, but they get there just a little too late to catch them, and all three of them get away, but the ship is blowing up in the process. So now all three of them are free, but will be constantly hunted down by Urko and his men, and with that, we have the end of episode 1. On to episode 2. General Urko is talking to one of his men about where the humans and Galen might be, and talks about how there are several settlements for humans in the area, with their own prefect and garrison in charge. I like this added bit of lore to the Planet of the Apes universe, as it gives a little bit more wiggle room for different situations and settings for our heroes to be in. Back with our fugitive friends, they're eating opers. What are opers? They're weird fruits. Does this have anything of importance to do with anything? No, I just like saying oper and I think they look funny. Pete, Alan, and Galen are walking around when they come across two men fighting. Pete doesn't bother to ask questions, and this decides to try to stop them from fighting, so they start fighting Pete. And then Alan's like, "Oi, what the fuck?" And they start fighting Alan, until an ape shows up and they have to run off. Now, the humans that were fighting each other were actually training to battle in the Colosseum for that specific prefect, and they must have been very confused when they started getting attacked by other humans. Our guys start heading elsewhere until Alan notices that he dropped the disc from the first episode that has all the important information on it, so now he has to go back. So now they have to go into town to get that disc back. So they get into town, and Galen realizes he has to work his sweet talk on the prefect in order to get that little disc. So he greets Prefect Barlow, and he gets invited in. And he seems like a pleasant enough guy, has some human artwork up, even collected some human artifacts, and they get to chit-chatting. This whole time, Galen's just trying to get the little disc, but he has to keep entertaining him, so he's in a pickle. Meanwhile, with Pete and Alan, they realize they're gonna have to get out of there fast, so they get the idea to steal some horses. So they knock out the guard, and they take his horses and his gun, and they get caught. For their crimes, Pete or Alan now have to fight to the death in the arena. Now we find out that the two guys fighting earlier are actually father and son, and one of them have to go in the arena to fight. And the father covers for the son because they know this is a fight to the death. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday! Tolar versus Pete Burke in a fight to the death in the arena of blood. Get your tickets now! Now, Pete's not too into the idea of killing an innocent man for sport, so he just defends himself for the whole fight before non-lethally taking him out. He doesn't even kill him when they bring in the ceremonial sword, come on now. I'm gonna have to give this match 2 out of 5 stars. They were pretty clumsy in there, and he just kinda spent a lot of the time running away. Not impressive. So the fight ends with nobody dying, and people are pretty pissed off. And at the same time, one of the guerrilla scouts from earlier show up in the village, so General Urko is going to know they're there any minute now. Meanwhile, Tolar isn't pretty happy that he didn't go over, and his son's trying to tell him that it's not that bad. Pete's able to get away, but Alan's still in jail, so when Urko shows up, he's able to work it out with Barlow that Alan will fight the guy's son, and that will be that. But don't you worry, cause Barlow's real sad that I had to come to this. Pete meets up with Tolar, so they can convince him that what's happening is really stupid and he should try to save both his son and Alan. So he helps break out his son and Alan from jail, and unfortunately gets killed in the process. Prefect Barlow does catch up to the son eventually, but you see, he's playing both sides, so he's always on top, and tells the son that he's free to go and that he never saw the other humans or Galen. The guys and the son, who I guess I should say his name is Dalton. Dalton goes his own way and the guys go the other way, and his future is unknown and we never see him again. In the next episode, our guys are visiting in town and they notice that one of the kids had made jewelry out of some of the stuff they found in the old city. So they decide to go down there and check it out because they'll probably find something useful. And Urko, who is always tracking them down, has tracked him down to this village, but by then they're long gone, and Urko starts interrogating the humans, and I have to say, Urko's a real mean son of a bitch. He's a great antagonist and played wonderfully by Mark Lenard. He's just competent and threatening enough that you have a sense of tension for our heroes every time he shows up. He's just a great character amongst a bunch of other great characters, and it was a delight to watch him. So Urko and his men are able to deduce that they made their way to the city and go after them. They very quickly find our heroes and start chasing them down. Things are looking pretty bad for them when an earthquake happens which opens up part of the ground and Urko and Pete fall through. Urko is knocked unconscious, and Pete finds out that they're in the old subway system. Urko comes to and starts attacking Pete, but Pete tells them that they're stuck underground and they'll soon run out of oxygen and die, so they have to work together. Will they coexist? No. While they're down there, Pete decides to try to get to know Urko and show him how the past used to be, and maybe having a bit of a character building moment. Meanwhile, on the surface, neither party can find their guys, and they have to call a truce for a moment because Alan is able to convince them that Urko is underground. He does this by communicating to Pete through Morse code, and it's a really neat little scene. Despite Pete's best efforts to get through the Urko, he simply does not believe that humans could have made all of this wonderful technology, and Pete, in threat of violence, has to tell Urko that fine, apes invented everything. This is enough to get Urko to stop being a negative Nancy and start seriously helping with the escape. Meanwhile, on the surface, the apes and Alan have been setting up a way to lift up the debris that's covering the hole so they can get out. Unfortunately for Pete, Urko notices a poster on the wall that shows an ape in a cage, and this infuriates him, so he hides it away for now so he can show it to his men later. When the team on the surface start to lift up the debris and make a passageway, Urko sees this as an opportunity to confront Pete about this and try to attack him, but Urko is very stupid and uses a metal rod that he hits a light bulb with, so he electrocutes himself and knocks himself out. Pete and Urko get lifted out of the hole, and when Urko comes to, he starts demanding that they kill them. So, I guess he didn't learn anything. But his men have some morals and understood that they just put all this work in and worked in cooperation to save his life and Pete's, so they don't shoot them. Though one of the soldiers says, "Okay, I'll shoot them," quotation marks. Once they're gone, the other ape shoots into the air twice, says they can go, and they leave. Once alone, the gorilla notices the poster that Urko had found. He takes a look and can't quite believe what he sees and destroys it. And that's the end of episode 3. In our next episode, while running away from gorillas, poor Galen accidentally sprains his leg when jumping down to escape. Thankfully, Pete and Alan are able to come across a farm and get help for him. This episode is pretty sweet, as it's Pete and Alan trying to coexist with the apes, while they also take care of Galen. They teach the apes new farming techniques that they initially don't take to until they realize its benefit, and slowly start to appreciate their presence. One of the interesting points of this episode is how one of the apes thinks they're bad luck and should not be around the cow that he wants to give birth to a bull, as bulls bring good luck. It's really neat to see what superstitions and rituals the apes have. It gives them a lot more depth and complexity that you didn't quite get with the movies. Now, of course, General Urko had sent his men to patrol the farmlands, so when they show up, they ask the apes, "Have you seen any humans?" And they say no because they're protecting the humans because they're giving them free labor. Seems pretty obvious. Though one of them talks to the gorillas in private later and asked if, hypothetically, there were humans, would there be a prize for turning them in? And no, there is no prize. But this interaction does cause the two gorillas to think, why did he ask that? Maybe we should keep an eye on this farm. While keeping an eye on the farm, one of the gorillas get quite the sight as he sees Alan and Pete taking a bath. Whoa! So he takes his information and goes back to General Urko. Meanwhile, the cow that's supposed to be giving birth isn't looking too good, and Anto thinks it's because of the humans' bad luck, so he threatens them with a pitchfork if the cow dies. Pete tries to defuse the situation by pretending to take one of the kids hostage, and don't worry, the kid's in on it. But it's still kind of funny. He's like, "Nobody move or I kill this child." Jesus, Pete. Alan is able to come up with a much less insane solution and tells them that he can help the cow give birth since he's worked on a farm and he's been talking this whole episode about how he has farm experience. So Alan helps a cow give birth, and the cow had twins. And they're both healthy bulls. Everyone's excited about the two bulls, and they seemingly forget about the crazy shit Pete just tried to pull moments ago. Unfortunately, General Urko and his men show up to ruin the celebration, so the humans have to hide. When questioned about what his scouts saw, Anto actually comes to the defense of the humans and says that there were never any humans there, and it was him, in fact, that they saw taking a shower, and that he was washing makeup off his face because he was doing a human face comedy bits for his family. Yep. Even after this foolproof explanation, Urko doesn't quite believe them and tells his men to check the barn out. But they don't find the humans, and they don't bother checking the upstairs of the barn because they see that there's two bulls, and using their foolproof logic come to the conclusion that the humans would have eaten the bulls if they were there, so obviously they're not. So after that wildly offensive display of speciesism, sure, I'll go with that. General Urko and his men leave, and the apes thank the humans for helping to deliver the bulls and helping around the farm. With this, we see that slowly but surely, Pete, Alan, and Galen are changing hearts and minds. And with that, and with Galen's leg fully healed, our guys are off to their next adventure. We get a little scene at the end where one of the regular patrols show up and ask what that weird structure is on their farm, which is a windmill which they were taught to make. And they say that the kid invented it, and that he's super smart. So in our next episode, we see our guys enter another ruined city and avoid another guerrilla patrol. Yeah, I know, I'm going to be saying this more times coming up, and it is somewhat repetitive, but it's a framework that gets the plot going, and the characters and scenarios are entertaining enough that it doesn't get too cumbersome. After that, they start looking around the city and find a large vault hidden behind a giant pile of rubble, so they decide to clear the rubble and see what's inside. Inside, they find a machine that looks like a futuristic jukebox, and they try to play some sweet tunes, but instead, some friggin' old guy comes out as a projection and starts talking to them. This turns out to be a hidden recording where a man explains that humanity is in peril and they have hidden pockets of very important information around the world. But before they can find out where these locations are, the recording cuts out. After looking around the machine, they find what seems to be the machine's battery and decide to look around the city to find stuff to power it with. While they're doing this, the patrol shows up again and they have to make a run for it. Unfortunately, Alan is captured. This is because while he's hiding with another human, a child sells him out for food. Fun fact, this kid is played by a young Jackie Earle Haley, that damn snitch. Capturing Alan's a pretty big deal, so General Urko and Dr. Zaius show up to talk to him. Now, of course, General Urko just wants to kill him, but Dr. Zaius is your sophisticated ape, and he comes up with this elaborate scheme where he holds Alan prisoner in a building, and he also puts the human woman he tried to hide with and Jackie Earle Haley in there, and I need to stop calling him that. His character's name is Craig, and Craig is being sent in there to be a spy so he can relay information back to the guerrillas because they promised him more food. And I do understand his actions. This is a poor child literally living in ruins and starving. He'll probably do anything. I mean, shit, he was eating an onion earlier. Dr. Zaius got the idea to do this after finding a picture of Alan's wife and child on him from the past. His logic here is that Alan will have an easier time opening up to a weird pretend family that he's been locked up with. Meanwhile, Galen and Pete are trying to think of a plan to get Alan free, while also making the battery to get that device working again. Now, I've mentioned before that I'm no scientist, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty dangerous to work with sulfuric acid that way. But it's okay because Pete is a professional. While he's trapped in the building, Alan gets to know Arn, which is the name of the blonde woman that was put in there with him, along with Craig more, and we get more character development for him. While only in one episode, I really like the characters of Craig and Arn, and I like how they utilize them. You could already tell that Jackie was going to be a great actor here. Also, through these other characters, we start to get a better idea of what these humans are dealing with and how they're just trying to get by. Unfortunately with Alan, of Craig being a kid, he starts to resent the fact that he's asking him to help around the place. Craig even destroys the toy airplane! No! Alan accidentally lets it slip about where Galen and Pete might be, and Craig goes to General Urko with this information. Though upon returning back to Alan and Arn, he instantly regrets it and breaks down crying. Feeling remorse, he helps Alan and Arn get out of there. They make their way back to where Galen and Pete would have been, but they're not there, so they uncover the machine to turn it on to see if they can find the location that they found out. Unfortunately, this also means that when they have to run off, that the gorillas accidentally turn on the machine and find out about the location too. They catch up to Galen and Pete, and they did find one of the locations, which is filled with machines that have tons of information. And they have to leave it because the gorillas are on their way. Once they arrive, we get an interesting conversation between Urko and Zeus, where Zeus wants to destroy all of this information because it could be found by other humans and used for blasphemy or whatever nonsense he believes in. But Urko wants to keep the information intact so he can figure out their secrets and use it against them in an interesting role reversal. But Zeus is able to convince him that it will do more harm than good, and they end up burning everything down. Back with our humans and their bittersweet escape, they go to a farm that Arn had mentioned she used to live at before her husband died. She couldn't stay there anymore because she couldn't stand the memories, but she sees that maybe there's hope, and she goes back there with Craig this time to take care of him and hopefully continue to lead a better life. Next up we have our beach episode, and before things can get wet and wild, they see some poor guy tied to a raft in the middle of the sea, and they have to go out and save him. Who is this man? He's dead. Or at least that's what he keeps saying. They bring him to a nearby cave to take care of him, and we finally get his real name, which is Gato. We find out that he was from a forced labor camp, and that he must have done something to have been tied to a raft and sailed out into the sea. Galen tries to get philosophical, but realizes he should probably stop talking.
Question. If he wants to be dead, why can't he be dead? And I've known a lot of humans who would be better off.
On top of being from a forced labor camp, we also see that he has a metal band around his wrist that has been permanently put on, and this shows the absolute cruelty that some of the apes show towards the humans. This is probably one of the darker episodes, all things considered. Pete and Alan go out to go scout the area and try to find some more information, and they get captured. Again. So Pete and Alan now meet the main guy of that area, and he's a real asshole. But they lie to him and say that all they've ever wanted to do their whole lives was fish, and that's why they were there. And of course he's always looking for new labor, so he decides to put them through trial by fire. Literally. Back with Galen and Gato, he's not having a good time babysitting, so he decides to just leave the cave and go look for them. So Pete and Alan have to dive underwater that's been set on fire while holding spears and get to the other side. And them being the two radical dudes they are, they do and catch fish along the way. Galen shows up and pretends to be real cross with the fact that Pete and Alan went off on their own, and demands to talk to who's in charge of all this. He's so sassy, he's great. So Galen goes to talk to the main guy, Herden, and he says that there is 2 escaped servants, but that's not what they said. They said that they left the farm and just really want to fish. So now, one of them are caught up in a lie, but who? Of course, Herden believes Galen and says that since the humans lied, that they'll have to answer to the gods. Who are the gods? Sharks. Have you remembered to give your thanks to sharks today? So how is this all decided? Well, they're gonna have to swim out to a certain part of the ocean, and then swim back. And if God Shark kills them, then, well, I guess God Shark has spoken. But you see, Galen has a plan. Galen talks to the two and gives Alan a knife. So Pete and Alan go out into the ocean, and they swim around for a bit, and then they fight a shark. So they pass their trial and come back to shore. But then, uh-oh, gorillas. One of them shows up and says, hey, you know that raft you tied the guy to? It's on the shore and he's missing. So now they know that Gato's alive. So now there's even more trouble. And on top of that, Bandor, who was the guy who was in charge of production, is going to come into the area tomorrow to start banding people and making them official fishermen. Do you think his parents knew what his occupation would be when he was born? So Bandor shows up, and Herden is like, I have 2 new guys and they can catch so many fish, they're really cool. And Pete and Alan don't exactly want metal bands welded onto their wrists, so they don't go to the banding ceremony. Instead, they go out to the ocean and they show them crazy new technology, a net. At the same time, Gato shows up, and they're like, hey, you know this Gato guy? He invented a net. And the apes think that's pretty cool. Due to the net's ease of use and ability to catch way more fish than simple spearfishing, it saves a lot of the older residents there from being essentially sent off to die. So that's nice. So the guys go out there to perform a fishing ceremony for Brandon and Hurton that involves them going out in a raft so they can help them catch a big fish and bring it back. But then they just kind of sail off, which seems like a huge hindsight from Brandon and Burden. And yeah, they escape. They get away. So we're on to our next episode, and oh shit, Alan got shot! He survives the gunshot, but he needs serious medical attention, and thankfully, Galen knows of a medical facility that shouldn't be too far away. Now, unfortunately, it's going to be pretty hard to get a human into an ape hospital, but don't worry, Galen's going to work his magic. Meanwhile, at the hospital, we meet our 2 doctors, Dr. Kyra and Dr. Stoll, and they're flirting. I'm just saying, if we had a medical show and the entire staff was apes, I'd watch it. When Kyra's alone, Galen's able to talk to her and convince her to help Alan out. He has this wonderful little quote when he's explaining to Kyra why he suddenly cares more about humans.
You were a decent, law-abiding ape once. What happened?
Well, I had this terrible accident. I collided with the truth. I discovered that humans and apes are supposed to be equals, not masters and slaves.
So they're led into the hospital, and we get a better look at how things operate in there. I really like this extra bit of world building, as we get a better look at the facilities and how their medical equipment looks. It's super interesting. But of course, the humans are treated like second-class citizens, and one of the humans is treated so poorly that she had her name taken away. But more on that in a bit. With Kyra and Galen, we find out that they actually used to be an item, but things didn't work out, but they're still fond of each other. Galen takes the time to talk to Kyra more about his newfound love for humans, and tries to convince her to think the same. I like these little moments between the two, which shows an extra layer of Galen's life that we didn't get to see. Kyra's having trouble working on Alan because she's not as familiar of human anatomy, but Galen knows where he can get a book on human anatomy to help her out in Dr. Zaius' house. So Pete and Galen make their way to Dr. Zaius' house, which is surprisingly easy to break into. To try to avoid suspicion, they take a statue of Dr. Zaius and put it under some blankets, so it looks like he's just kinda sleeping. Meanwhile, Kira and Alan are having a chat, and Alan's getting the suspicion that Kira might still have feelings for Galen. So they get back of the book on human anatomy, and they're ready to start the surgery. But then another problem shows up. Alan needs a blood transfusion, and he has a very particular blood type, so now they had to find somebody with that blood type. Remember the woman of no name from earlier? It turns out they took her name away because when she was doing a blood transfusion with her brother, it killed her brother because it was the wrong blood types, and that made her cursed. And that's perfectly logical. But guess who has the right blood type for Alan? You guessed it. So she is also prepped to do the blood transfusion of Alan, and they start the surgery. Dr. Stoll comes in and asks what's going on here, why are you operating on a human? So now they have to explain what's going on to him, and Dr. Stoll isn't as cool as Dr. Kyra. It also doesn't help that Dr. Stoll sees their book on human anatomy. He goes to leave, but Galen has other plans. So now he's trapped there, and he has the help of the surgery. And it's a good thing he was there because he notices when something goes wrong, and he's able to get the right sort of meds for it. Dr. Zayas finds out that his house got robbed, and General Urko is informed, and they put 2 and 2 together on who the thief could be, so General Urko makes his way to the hospital. Thankfully, now Dr. Stoll and Dr. Kyra are fine of hiding them. When General Urko is asking where they are, Dr. Stoll tells them that their hospital has had an issue of the plague and shows them a room that is theoretically full of dead people, and that once the humans found out there was a plague, they left. And this is enough for General Urko. Once he leaves, Dr. Kyra and Galen are able to say their goodbyes, and Alan and Pete are led away as dead bodies under covers. For our next episode, we have a murder mystery on our hands. Who killed Fauna's father? Well, some of the apes have come to the conclusion that it was humans because of false testimony, so they just kind of start going around burning down a human's house and killing him. These apes are a vigilante group called the Dragoons that dress and act like Klansmen, and much like Klansmen, they are violent idiots who cause destruction in their path. Pete, Alan, and Galen witness this atrocity and work to get to the bottom of it. One of the first people they talk to about this is Fauna, who they find out is blind, and she figures that all 3 of them are apes. With the help of this cover, Pete and Alan are given new names, Alar and Fargo, and, I think those are an improvement. Sorry to any of the Pete and Allens out there. Fauna is a very kind and welcoming chip, except for humans, which she hates, so she invites the 3 back to her place and we get to know her a bit more. While they're talking to her, they try to figure out who killed Fauna's father, and she's convinced that it's 2 humans. Before they can get to know more from Fauna, she hears her uncle arriving, so they have to leave, and their excuse for leaving is that they're in trouble with the Ministry of Education for reading forbidden books. Of course, Fauna thinks it's a whole lot of nonsense that you would get in trouble just for reading some books, so she agrees to help them hide out in her hidey hole, which is a cave along the seaside. When they're in the cave, Fauna starts talking about how this place gives her memories of someone who used to be a good friend of hers, and how that friend left her when they became blind. Fargo's voice reminds her of that friend, and she asks to touch his face, which is of course a big problem. So Galen lets her touch his face, so now she thinks Fargo is this strapping young chimp and falls in love with him. To get more information on the Dragoons, Galen has to pretend to be one of them, so he gains information to find where their meeting place is and joins the group. Things are kind of awkward with the whole Fauna being in love with Pete, and he didn't even seem aware of this. Galen had to tell him, so Pete had to have a one-on-one of Fauna and tell her that, he's just not that into her, and this breaks her heart. Now, one important note here is that Urko and his men may be awful people, but they don't like it when other apes go out of their way to do vigilante work and go against the word of law. So when the Dragoons start going around killing people and setting fire to houses, the lieutenant of that area is pretty pissed off about this. Knowing this, Pete and Alan have to go into town and find the lieutenant there. They find Lieutenant Perdix, who is none too happy to see 2 humans, and they have to do everything to convince them that they know where the Dragoons are and they are working against the law. Then Galen shows up and breaks into the police office, and this kind of threatens him with a gun. And they just take him prisoner and say, "You're gonna come with us and we're gonna show you what's happening." All this time, the Dragoons are also trying to find out where this murderous human was, and they're told about 2 humans hiding out in a cave near the beach. So that's where they head. And this is also where Alan and Pete head with their prisoner. The lieutenant is let free and goes to go confront them. They get into a pretty heated confrontation, and "Watch out, Fauna! You're walking along the side of a cliff!" She falls into the ocean, but don't worry, Pete's there to save the day, and he dives in to save her. This is also where she finds out that he's a human, and she's not that into that. While Fauna is freaking out because she presumes it was humans who killed her father, her uncle, who was one of the Dragoons, goes to comfort her and admits the truth, that it was actually a heated confrontation that ended in his death. Her father, and a man named Zod got into an argument about how much her father loved humans, and during that argument, Zod hit him and he fell over and cracked his head on some rocks, killing him. In desperation, Zod tries to tell his men that this doesn't matter because humans are their enemies, but they're hearing none of this, and Zod is taken off to jail. In the end, they're saying their goodbyes, and Fauna is still trying to look deep into herself to think why she could have fallen in love with a human. Hey everyone, we sure have been looking at a lot of apes. How are y'all doing? Need to take a break? Go to the washroom? Get something to drink? Take your time. I will just sit here staring into oblivion until you get back. You good? Alright, let's keep going. On our next episode, we have horse racing. Here we see General Urko, and hey, it's Prefect Barlow again. What's up? They're betting on horse racing. Urko's pretty full of himself, and he's sure he's gonna win, but after his horse loses one of its shoes, it ends up losing. This pisses him off, so he says, "Go to the guy who shoot this horse and see what went wrong." By pure chance, our 3 boys are hanging out with the blacksmith that made the horseshoe and his son. The gorillas show up and tell off the blacksmith for screwing up the horseshoe, and they also say that there's been a human riding horses, which is against the law. We know that this is the son doing it. So if the gorillas find out that he's been the one riding horses, he's going to be in quite a bit of trouble. While this is happening, they hear a yell from the farm, and they go to see what happened. We see that poor Galen has been stung by a tiger scorpion, and unless he gets the antidote soon, he might die. Well, that's quite the turn of events. So, they have to get to the nearest hospital quick, but they won't get there in time. So the son, who was just told not to ride horses, has to ride horses to the hospital because he knows the route, and he has the skill to do so. So he gets a horse and makes his way there, trying to avoid anyone seeing him. He gets there and hey, we see Kyra again. Hi Kyra. And he's able to explain what's happening, and Kyra's able to hand him the antidote, where he then makes a mad dash back on his horse. Unfortunately, with time running out, and in a panic, he has to ride right by some gorillas and is seen. He is able to get there in time and gets the antidote to Garland, but now they're in big trouble. Apparently, the penalty for a human riding a horse is death, which seems a little harsh to me. So the guys go to Prefect Barlow and are like, hey, can you not kill this guy? His name's Gregor, by the way, I love his name. And they work out a deal that if Alan, who apparently knows how to ride horses, can win the race, he'll sweet talk Zeus into freeing Gregor. So Prefect Barlow has a meeting with General Urko where he tells them that Dr. Zeus totally gave him permission to use a human jockey. This wrestles Urko's jimmies pretty hard, but he has to agree to it, and the race is on. But you see, Urko cheats. Urko is the Billy Mitchell of horse racing. And they know he cheats, so they're also gonna cheat, because why not? Now, Urko doesn't know that it's Alan who's going to be the human jockey, but he does have another plan up his sleeve because he wants to win. He tells the blacksmith that if he lets the human jockey lose, then he won't kill his son Gregor.
I love racing!
On the day of the race, Alan and Pete notice there's something up with the horse, so they go to check it out, and the blacksmith had sabotaged the horse's horseshoes. So they remove what was causing the horse pain and continue on to start the race. The race is on and there's many shenanigans, but ultimately Alan wins. But Urko also sees that it's Alan who was the human jockey this whole time. Alan makes his escape on the horse while Galen and Pete take the prison buggy that Gregor was in and also make a run for it. General Urko and his men give chase, but they don't know that Alan and friends took the Lord of the Rings school of hiding. So they lose them. And while the guys are walking down the side of the road, they run into Barlow, who's like, well, never saw you guys, I'm going back to my old job, later. And he brings Gregor and his father with him, and that's the end of that. This episode starts with Pete being captured, and now the other two have to go save him. This is a big day for General Urko, who's so giddy to tell Dr. Zaius all about it. Dr. Zaius has his own plans on how to deal with Pete, and he has a young scientist with him called Wanda, who has all the answers. They had found a book in a time capsule, and the book's about brainwashing, so they're gonna MK Ultra him. This is probably the creepiest episode of the series, and as a fan of horror, I really dig it. Just the atmosphere of the whole thing as they're trying to get information out of Pete is pretty chilling. Wanda's a great antagonist, and it's a shame she's only in one episode. The actress who plays her, Beverly Garland, did a fantastic job. Her actions and demeanor are cold and menacing, and she's almost the opposite of Urko, who simply goes straight to the simple violence and anger of a situation, while she has a bit more patience. Meanwhile, back with Alan and Galen and Alan steal a carriage. Good for them. I mean, not good for them, stealing's bad, but time is of the essence here. While Pete is initially unfazed by Wanda's techniques, he eventually starts to break down. This being an alternate history, there's a very good chance that Pete was in some sort of war and he's having PTSD during all this. Meanwhile, Alan and Galen are on their new carriage and they get through a checkpoint, but they have a plan. You see, Galen is going to put on his Sunday best and use that to sweet talk his way through. Also, the gorillas aren't very good at inspecting the cart because Alan's just kinda hiding at the bottom, and good thing they didn't look down. In order to get information on where Pete might be, Galen goes to his parents' house to talk to his mom and dad, who are in very important positions in society. And here we meet his mom, who is a complete sweetheart. God, did I ever mention this how much I love Galen, and how wonderful this scene was of them getting to reunite and say hi to each other? It's so nice. But of course they can't stay long because Galen needs to get information from his father and then they have to leave. Unfortunately, his father, while loving his son, isn't as much of a sweetheart, especially when it comes to humans, and is initially reluctant to help. Though when the gorillas come snooping around because they found a suspiciously abandoned hay cart, his father and mother quickly hide them inside their own secret tunnel. Secret tunnel beneath the rug, hiding from gorillas. Secret, 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 secret. The gorillas are coming in looking for Galen, but neither the mom or the dad are having any of this, and they are asked to leave very sternly. Back of the interrogation, they're playing Spin the Human, and whoever they lands on, they have to smooch. Alan and Galen are still trying to find Pete, so they do the next sensible thing, break into a police office and hold the lieutenants at gunpoint. Here they find out that Pete's not even being kept in that area, so now they have to find out where they shipped him off to, and the only way they can do this is by breaking into Urko's office and finding his plans. And of course, it's very easy to just break into houses in this universe. So they just kind of slip in through the window and start looking around. Back of the interrogation, Wanda's at her wit's end because Pete's not giving her anything. So she goes on to the next best thing, seduction. Pete's pretty out of it because he's been being spun in a circle for presumably hours at this point. So when she starts making her moves, we see I suppose, flashback where he's remembering a time where he was with a lady and they were talking. And wow, this pretty blonde doesn't really know a lot about Pete. How's it going, Pete? What do you do? What are your hobbies? Tell me everything. Then she goes in for the kiss, but uh-oh, that's not a pretty blonde, that's Wanda. Damn it, she almost had him. So now she's exhausted all the possibilities, and Urko has to take care of him now. But can General Urko master the art of seduction? Let's find out. Just kidding, he's just gonna give him a lobotomy. Oh, Urko. Back with the other two, they found out where Pete's being held and make a stylish exit right as General Urko is getting back to his office. They make their way to where Pete is being held, but find they're too late as he's being loaded into a hearse. Now they gotta go save Pete from having holes drilled in his brain. They go back to Galen's mom, who's a real cool ma, and she's like, yeah, take my carriage, go on and head there, I'll come with you. So they hatch a scheme where they dress up Galen as a poor, injured chimpanzee that they found at the side of the road, and they're urgently bringing to the hospital for help. She uses her position and influence to basically demand that this poor chimp be seen, and the doctor's like, but I gotta drill some holes in this guy's head. But she's having none of that because this is an emergency. They make their way into the room where Pete's being held, and after some back and forth with the guards, all hell breaks loose. Alan and Galen attack the guards, they take their guns, and all this time his mom is like, oh god, what's going on? So now all three of the guys are this fighting gorillas, and it's this pure chaos in the hospital. There's apes in hospital beds, just like what the fuck is going on? Everyone's getting knocked over, and eventually they're able to escape. Later that day, when Galen's mother and father are being questioned, because Galen is named as the crazed chimp helping the humans, they tell them that they have no idea what he's talking about and that he's dumb, so he has to leave. Shortly after, Galen and the guys come into the house and have a heartwarming goodbye with Galen's mom and dad, and it's very sweet. Oh, look at Galen hugging his dad. This next episode starts with the guys hanging out at a farm until they have to hide when gorillas show up. The gorillas are there to steal grain, ask for the grain tax from these poor farmers. The father and son who work at this farm aren't too happy about this, but the son's especially pissed. So he hatches a plan with the guys to steal the grain back. Unfortunately, this scheme doesn't go too well because the lieutenant that works in that area and the other gorillas are pretty pissed off that they just had their stolen grain stolen back. They go to question the farmers and things get heated. The son eventually starts just fighting the gorillas because he's had enough of this shit, and ends up unfortunately dying in the process. Along with this, they burn down the barn. Later on, when the father has to bury his son, he talks with Pete, Alan, and Galen about how he should have fought harder. Galen happens to know the prefect that resides over this area and thinks that the lieutenant went way too far, which, yeah, he did, so he goes to go talk to him. He hopes by meeting with the prefect that he can explain what's happened and hopefully have the lieutenant removed. Things are looking good so far because Galen gets along great with the prefect and he understands where he's coming from. Unfortunately, later that day, when the lieutenant goes to go talk to the prefect, it turns out that he has lied and bribed his way into him being the prefect instead, and the other guy is unceremoniously fired. Worse yet, this new prefect, Aboro, seems to be good friends of General Urko, who shows up to congratulate him. But Aboro doesn't seem too thrilled to see him, and we see why, as they're both friendly with each other but clearly passive-aggressive. Aboro has always been jealous of General Urko because he got further in life than him. He's been stuck in the same position for 20 years while Urko became a general. Of course, a lot of this is his own fault as he got caught cheating during the academy exams, which I guess is a thing. Oboros is also nervous because he was only able to get this position through corruption, and General Urko hates corruption. Does that sound like a pot calling a kettle black? Well, yeah, it is. Back with the guys, they can't quite wrap their head around how Oboros was able to get this position, and they send Galen in one of his fabulous disguises to find out some information. I haven't talked about it much, but in some episodes, Galen will have to change his name and even his appearance slightly to avoid suspicion, and it's always delightful. This time around, he's Octavio, Zeus' assistant, and he's got sass and attitude for days. Outside of getting information, he's also there to stir the pot between Oboros and General Urko. How does he do this? Well, by telling Oboros that Zeus thinks he'd be a great general, and that he might be able to replace Urko. But in order to replace Urko, they need to find something that would be able to have him dismissed from his position. And they can't seem to quite think of something. But Oboros has a pretty simple solution. Let's just kill Urko. Now this would probably cause more trouble than it's worth, and Octavio isn't that huge on the idea, but Oboros seems pretty dead set on it. So now, Galen has to get his buddies and make his way to General Urko in order to tell him, hey, your best friend is trying to kill you. Now walking right into the camp to talk to General Urko probably isn't the best idea, so Galen puts on a disguise before he goes in. He then points a gun at Urko and says, I have a message for you and you better listen. Oboros is trying to kill you. But General Urko is just not going to let some guy threaten him with a gun, so he flips the table on him and takes off his mask and sees that it's Galen. Of course, he thinks Galen's gone completely nuts. Pete and Alan make their way in with rifles, and they have Urko surrounded. Galen says, hey, listen to me, this is seriously happening, come with us and we'll show you. Now you don't argue with crazy, so Urko decides to go with him, but of course he brings some of his men with him. He arrives at Oboros' place, and he has dinner all set up for everybody. Urko initially plays along because he wants to embarrass Galen when he turns out to be wrong. We see that Oboros is going to kill Urko by using a bomb connected to a long fuse that I guess he brought from Acme. Pete shows up, and without any subtlety, he just tells the guard at the door, hey, Oboros sent me here to kill Urko, where's he at? Urko sees this as his chance, and he's going to expose this scheme right here and now, so he forces Pete and Galen into the room and says these two are imposters. Now the bomb fuse has already been lit, so it's just a matter of time before it blows up, and Oboros goes to make his smooth exit, but the door's locked, so he starts to panic, and Urko's wondering why he's panicking. Then Alan, being the maniac he is, comes in through the window holding the bomb and says, now let all of us go, or we'll blow everybody up, including ourselves. Of course, Alan isn't that crazy, and he's already defused the bomb, but they don't know that. So the guys make their escape, and Oboros has some explaining to do. And yeah, that's how the episode ends. Our next episode sees our guys hanging out in the village, and shortly after they leave, a malaria outbreak happens. On top of this, Galen is not too happy with Alan, as he was talking about how he was a spaceman from the future to a girl he likes. When Pete and Alan hear that people are getting sick, they go back to help because that's just who they are. Galen is still cross with them but realizes the seriousness of the situation. Now, the story of a serious outbreak happening in an area that could become deadlier as it spreads is hitting kinda close to home to something that happened pretty recently now, doesn't it? There's an amount of ignorance and lack of knowledge around this, what is to them a mystery disease that to them only affects humans. It's only until Alan and Pete see that there's stagnant water everywhere that they put two and two together. When the council gets word of what's going on, they have no idea why humans are getting sick and dying, and they think they should try to find a cure and help them out so they don't lose too many people, while General Urko wants to kill everybody and burn the place down because he's a genocidal maniac. Things get worse when the apes find out that this mystery disease affects apes too, and not just humans. When Alan and Pete talk to the prefect and tell them what malaria is and what's causing it, he initially is hesitant to believe them, but eventually comes to understand. When he goes to the council about this, they don't seem to believe that mosquitoes can give you a deadly disease that kills you. Seriously, watching them all have to find a cure and make medicine and mask up was surreal. Like, yeah, this kind of situation isn't anything new, but it was still pretty interesting to see play out so many years ago. And it was depressing to be able to see these same ignorant attitudes seen within the apes as were seen within certain people during quarantine. Is you two fine with me saying the word? Obviously I'm talking about the parallels to quarantine. Anyway, let's keep going. By some miracle and plot convenience, they find out that the materials they need to make the cure are actually in the area, and they head out to go get it. After some science, they've concocted what they hope will be something that can work to help stave off the malaria, and it's a good thing because more and more people are getting sick. In another parallel, despite having a cure that seems to be working, General Urko does not want his apes to use it. Despite this, Alan, being a good guy, finds the sick ape and gives him the medicine while he's delirious. Of course, this only pisses off Urko more because he hasn't seen that medicine takes a bit to get working. So he heads to the village and he's like, alright, I'm burning this all down. But the guy who they gave the medicine to shows up and says, hey, I feel way better because I took the medicine. It's also important to note that Urko is going to go through with this whole burn down the village thing without talking to Dr. Zaius first. And Zaius is not too happy about this, obviously. We're starting to see tension between the two more and more often, and it's a shame we didn't get to see this built upon in later episodes. So, with that, people are cured and the day is saved. Oh, and Alan goes to go say goodbye to the woman he was flirting with. That B-plot didn't really go anywhere. There was a scene where, when she was delirious, she was talking about how she met a spaceman, but that was just chalked up to her being sick, and that's about that. And we never see her again. Wow, only 2 episodes left. We've all come a long way. And I hope you've been enjoying it as much as I've had making it. So without further ado, let's talk about the second last episode, The Liberator. Now, this episode was rumored to have been unaired after one of the actors had a psychotic break and believed he was one of the apes. He ended up eating one of the extras' faces. It was one of the most graphic incidents ever caught on camera and has never been shown to the public. Okay, I'm kidding. It was unaired in some cities because there was a plot line about using gas to attack people, and the Vietnam War was happening at the same time, so I guess some people were understandably kinda sensitive about such a subject matter. The episode starts with a group of gorillas trying to pick out a new slave amongst a lineup of people, and yeah, it's, God, I forgot how dark this universe is. One of these people make a run for it, and while making a run for it, run into our guys. Unfortunately for our friends, they don't know that this town has a practice of replacing other people with them, so they'll get sent off to the mines instead of them. In fact, in an effort to avoid being sent off to a mine, they hunt down other humans to give to the gorillas. Did I also mention that this town acts like a cult? That's right, we got cults again! Woo! So the guy that ran away tricks Alan and Pete into being ambushed and taken in, but the guy who ran away is also punished for running away, despite finding 2 new people, and we find out what they do to people that try to get away. In a truly eerie scene, he's tied up and a man in an outfit and mask comes out and performs a strange ritual on him. Soon, the man who's tied up stops breathing and dies. Pete and Alan are imprisoned at this point, but Galen sees everything, and this messes his shit up, and he's gotta tell him what he just saw. And yeah, Galen has no explanation for how this guy just died, and it's pretty freaky stuff. And Pete and Alan think it's pretty freaky too. Pete tries to sweet talk one of the ladies there, but he soon finds out that she's actually the girlfriend of the head honcho hunter. This hunter's name is Myro, and Myro is not too happy with his hunting performance lately. He really needs to get those numbers up. But his girlfriend Talia knows he's just having a bad day, and she's sure he'll do better next time. What a great girlfriend. Meanwhile, Galen's talking to the head human in charge of the area, Brun, and he's like, "You better let go of my 2 special boys right now." But Brun points out to Galen that this village runs under different laws, and that the apes have permitted them to capture other humans in order for them to replace their workers. So Galen's out of luck. He's just working within the law. This very, very screwed up law. So Pete and Alan are put to some hard labor, and that night, Galen decides to try to break them out, and that rescue attempt doesn't go so great, and they get put back in prison, and now Galen is put in the house prison. The next day, the hunters bring back another person, and that person is having none of this shit and starts kicking their ass, and Miro goes to intervene and he gets his ass kicked, and he gets his arm cut. Pete and Alan see that he will die if he does not get this treated, and they use that to bargain their way out. Later that day, while Miro is healing up, he's trying to explain to them how their system works, and it's not any less screwed up. Talia explains that one day Miro will be a great leader of this village when the father passes away and he takes over. But he can only become leader if he has a wife, because if you haven't noticed, this village is incredibly backwards. So you think Talia will this be his wife because she's already his girlfriend, but apparently she's going to be sent off to go die in some work camp. Dear lord, this episode is dark. Okay, back on track. So he doesn't want anyone but Talia, and that's a huge form of conflict for him. So Pete and Alan say, hey, if we prove that this death ritual is bullshit and that there's no weird god trying to tell you guys what to do, will you stop sacrificing people and selling people off? So they go to the temple, and Pete goes to enter it to show that there's nothing crazy going on. But then all of a sudden, he passes out. So Alan goes to save him, and thankfully he's still alive. When they're trying to figure out what the hell happened, they realize that it's because there's a gas leak in there. So they MacGyver the stuff around them in order to make these makeshift gas masks, and they enter the building, and they find out that there's a little safe spot, so they enter that. And they find that the wacky mask that the leader's been wearing this whole time has a gas mask inside it, and that's how he's able to do the ritual. So Brun shows up, and he's none too happy that they found out his secret. And we find out that he was trying to get enough gas so he can eventually attack the apes with it. And you can start seeing why this episode was banned in a lot of states. Once again, this is obviously a very important subject matter to talk about, and people shouldn't be censored from doing so, but considering the climate at the time, I get it, so it's fine, and I am happy we're able to see it today. Pete and Alan point out that this will all lead to just more violence and misery, and try to talk him out of it, but before he can really say much, a fire starts, and they all have to leave. Grumbly Bumbly tries to go back in, and this is a fatal error as the place blows up with him inside of it. Later that day, the boys talk to Miro and Talia, and Miro's learned a very important lesson, hopefully, and vows to make peace with the other humans. And, you know, I'm just gonna be optimistic that that goes alright for him. I don't think it's going to, but hey. For our 14th and final episode, we have Up Above the World So High. In this episode, we have a nice, simple storyline where the boys try to help a guy make a glider. And then, an evil chimp tries to use that technology, drop bombs on our enemies. Wait, goddammit! So this flying man is called Leoric, and our guy is to see him testing out one of his contraptions while they're just walking along the beach. And he does get some air, but he eventually falls, and they go save him. Unfortunately, they have to leave his little flying mechanism back where it was, as they get him to safety. Once they're at safety, they start getting to know him more. Leoric talks about his love for flying and how he's always wanted to fly, and how he's been trying to get that to happen by making all these gliders. Pete and Alan are happy to help him make his perfect glider, and Galen is always willing to learn something new, so that's what they get up to. Unfortunately, some apes saw Leoric flying, and they have to keep that in mind too. And they're right to, because the apes find this glider and have a whole council meeting about it. They're just having their mind blown that a human could be capable of flight. They've never flown before, how could a human do it? That's crazy! So of course, as per usual, Urko and Zeus just want to find the human that made this and kill them, so they don't teach other humans how to fly. God damn it, guys. Now at this meeting, we meet a young female scientist called Carcia. It's not Wanda, it's Carcia. I know, I was disappointed too. But don't worry, she's great. She says, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill this human when we find them. Maybe we should learn from them instead. And she gets to go ahead to do that. And they find him surprisingly easily while Alan and Pete aren't keeping an eye on him. Galen just saw him get whisked off. I guess he just went to go take a whiz and they got him. Galen goes to go see if he can find out any information about our missing boy, and we see that he has started to work with Carcia on his new flying device. Carcia meets Galen, and they very quickly start making googly eyes at each other, or whatever chimps do to flirt. Pete and Alan are making their own glider because they have a good feeling that Leoric's is going to be very flawed, and this could get him into big trouble. Once they're done making a prototype, they have to test it, but they can't do that as humans because they might be seen by apes, so Galen has to do it. And he's a bit apprehensive, but once he gets going, Galen loves gliding. I like this scene. Look at him go, he's adorable, he's having so much fun. Another important detail for this episode is that earlier in the episode, Leoric finds glass on the beach, but he has no idea what this is, but Pete does, and he's gonna make stuff out of it. So the plan is that when the day comes, they're going to replace Leoric's glider with theirs. But they might have some trouble with this because Leoric is very proud of his craft, and he might not accept someone else's work. During all this, Galen and Carcia are getting closer. And Garcia starts telling Galen, hey, you know, those gorillas and orangutans are pretty dumb. Should they really be in charge? Maybe we should be in charge. Throughout the episode, you see Garcia dealing with the condescending attitude from the men around her, and she is just dripping with wit and sarcasm. But the way she goes about getting her revenge isn't so great, because she somehow found a box of... Am I allowed to say on YouTube? I'm pretty sure I've already said numerous times throughout this video, so I'll find out. But let's just back up for one moment and go back to Leoric's flying machine, because they still have to get rid of it. Pete is able to use the glass to make a magnifying glass, and Galen is able to position this on Leoric's glider so the sun shines on it and sets it on fire. And wait a second, magnifying glass, people are wearing glasses. We see apes wearing glasses in this series. Why is this a big deal to them? Now, if Leoric's hopes and dreams successfully destroyed, Pete and Alan can come in with their glider for him to use instead. Okay, now let's get back to the part where Cassie is trying to destroy everybody. Thankfully, Pete and Alan are able to talk to Galen and convince him that she's bad news. And she further convinces Galen that she's bad news by having a whole plan set up about how they're going to use the gliders to drop stuff onto the houses of specific targets. She really thought all this out. I kind of feel bad for Pete and Alan, because now they have to go destroy the glider they put all this work into, but they're not able to do so because when they go in there and start to destroy it, Leoric gets pissed off and tries to stop them. The guards are called and they have to make a run for it, and Galen and Leoric end up being put in prison because they presume that Leoric was also trying to escape. The next day, Pete and Alan try to break Galen out of prison, and Alan shoots a note through the bars so Galen can read it, but a guard shows up, so he just kind of has to eat the note, and we never get to know what was on it, so much for that plan. Despite the holdup, Garcia is gung-ho to see this glider glide, and she's going to stop at nothing, even if it means the death of a human. She would hate that. Leoric and Galen are taken to the test site, and they're going to force Leoric to glide the glider, which I'm pretty sure to be super happy to, because if it goes wrong and he dies, then oh well. But Galen says Leoric's hand is hurt, he can't do it, and I sure won't. Don't ask me to glide. But then they get the brilliant idea of, haha, let's make Galen glide, he would hate that. Leoric really wants to fly though, so what ends up happening is Galen glides but also has Leoric on his back, and nobody sees an issue with any of this. Garcia is just like, yeah, whatever, as long as it works. Pete and Alan also find their way to the area to help Galen out, but he doesn't need it because we have another fantastic case of ape incompetence. They didn't seem to think that it was a bad idea to let their two prisoners just kind of fly away from them. Like, yeah, they had people set up with guns to shoot them if they went too far, but they're a really bad shot, and Pete and Alan kind of knock out one of them. So, they get away, and they land in the water, and apparently just kind of landing in the water means they're dead. They're dead, that's it. We can never learn how flight works ever again, that's it. Ah, jeez. So Pete and Alan go out on a raft to save the two, and Galen gets seasick. And that's the end of the episode. And, unfortunately, the end of the TV show. I really like this show, and I found everyone to be delightful. The chemistry between the main leads were great, and I had a great time watching it. If you can find it, I highly suggest watching it, it's a lot of fun. And normally, this is where I would start concluding the video, and give a bit more thoughts about what I thought of the show, and tell you what's going to come up next. But I came across something very interesting. During my research for this show, I found out that there were several episodes that were planned but never used, and 2 of these episodes had full scripts written for them. And thanks to a wonderful archivist, I have found these 2 scripts and I can tell you what was in them, so I am very excited to show you this. I also want to talk a bit about the pilot episode that was written by Serling of the Twilight Zone but never used. There was also some comic books to kind of expand on the story after it was over. Along with one of those books that have a record that go along with it, you would play the record that have the voices and sound effects, and then there'd be a little storybook. They're cute. I'll just be sticking with the scripts, but I do highly suggest taking a look at them on your own time. They're really interesting. This episode, entitled A Fallen God, would see the guys coming across a village where they find the lead ape who preaches the evils of humans, and Alan and Pete would be captured and made slaves for a family. This all comes across as pretty par for the course of the show, but there is one very interesting detail. The family they end up being forced to work for have a radio that almost works, and Alan wants to get this radio to work. This mission of his ends up getting him screwed over, because when him and Pete go to escape, he's more concerned with the radio than he is with getting free, and gets injured in the process. So now Pete's free, but Alan is still captured, and he uses this time to try to fix the radio. When they catch him trying to fix the radio, they decide not to punish him, but help him because these apes want to get the radio to work too. And they're fascinated by the fact that he can speak and comes off as very intelligent. When Pete meets up with Galen, he finds out that there's humans out there in Dim Darn Hills, and figures that he can try to find them and get help. The rest of the episode would see Pete making contact with the humans and devising a plan to rescue Alan, while Alan makes more progress repairing this radio. Alan starts to bond with these apes through their shared interest in repairing this radio, and things start to turn around. And these once very hateful apes think, hey, maybe humans aren't so bad. So of course, it's a terribly ironic turn of events when Pete eventually comes to go rescue him. Oh, it's important to mention that the ape he mainly made friends with repairing the radio is called Darden. They're besties now. They're able to get the radio working, and they start to hear stuff on the other side. It's people. We find out that there is an advanced civilization of humans in another city, and that they've been trying to find communication of others this whole time. But then Pete comes to rescue Alan, and the other humans show up too, so of course a bunch of chaos ensues, and in that chaos, the radio gets destroyed because nobody can have nice things in this universe. This is devastating to Alan and Pete when he realizes the gravity of what just happened and what Alan had just discovered. The apes of the village are able to resolve things fairly peacefully, at least with Alan, Galen, and Pete, but the damage has already been done, and it's best off that they leave. But there is a silver lining, as Darden does start to repair the radio once again. This episode plays directly into the canon of the end of the series, where they would find this city of advanced humans, and eventually be able to use them to get back to their own timeline. And it is a damn shame that we never got to see that, but such is network television. So, let's take a look at the next episode, The Hostage. This episode has everything: political espionage, spies, underground resistance groups, romance. It's wild. The boys find an underground group of freedom fighters that's a mix of humans and apes that are called the United Freedom Force, and Galen knows one of them. Her name is Laura. And the above area that they're part of has strict rules where humans cannot leave without special permission, and they are fighting in order to repeal that law. It's really interesting to see all these new characters that seem like they'll be really fleshed out and given more, and it's a shame we never got to see more of this. The idea of a whole underground faction trying to overthrow this totalitarian government is really neat. Time is spent of our characters getting to know each other and knowing more of the members of this underground resistance group and how they work. They're mostly peaceful, but unfortunately have a few extremist outliers. One of these people, well actually Gorilla, being Kemmer, who is a fugitive after getting into a conflict with some soldiers in the above world and killing one of them. Because of this, he's tracked down back to where their headquarters are, and the soldiers attack. So everyone has to leave this underground headquarters, and in the ensuing chaos, you'll never guess it, our boys are captured. During the soldiers invading the base and everyone trying to escape, Kemmer gets the idea to kidnap Laura, who's hesitant to leave because she doesn't want to leave Galen behind. While Laura is a member of this underground freedom force, she is also the daughter of a senator, so she's going to be used for leverage. So now Galen and the guys, along with some other members that were captured, are put on trial by the council and General Urko. And of course, as always, General Urko just wants to kill them. Things get worse when the UFF send a letter saying that they have kidnapped the senator's daughter and that they will kill her if their demands are not met. One of the members on trial rightfully point out that this is not how the UFF operates and that they're generally peaceful, and that this act must have been done by extremists. The council comes up with the idea to send Alan and Galen to go find where the UFF is and save Laura. Are they bad enough dudes to save the senator's daughter? Let's find out. On top of this, they only have 48 hours before General Urko starts executing the other prisoners. Jesus Christ. Thankfully, through conversations with its members, Alan has a pretty good idea of where their other base might be. Meanwhile, Pete's in prison, and he's not feeling too great about the whole upcoming execution thing, but the senator and his wife are there to ask him questions. They're obviously distraught by what is happening with Laura, but are at least willing to listen to Pete to try to get information out of him, and even seem to have a level of pity for him. Alan is able to find where their base is, and they find out that Laura is in on the kidnapping plot, so at least she's not in danger. On Pete's end of things, he's making more progress with the senator and his wife, especially his wife, who seems to be more willing to listen to him, and he gets through to her that people getting executed is just going to cause more problems. Back of the UFF, a very similar conversation is being had, where it's pointed out that if they continue this whole charade, it's just going to cause more misery for everyone around, because yes, they generally think that Laura could die any minute now. And there's a rather lengthy conversation between Galen and Laura if the end justifies the means. And hoo boy, things get worse. So the UFF sent another letter, and they put one of Laura's necklaces in there to send a message, and this pisses off Urko and a bunch of the other apes. So in retaliation, he has one of the prisoners killed, even though it has not been 48 hours yet. And yes, he actually executes him. Nobody saves him in time. There's a whole thing about it, and yeah, it's bleak as fuck. While they don't describe how the actual death happens, you get a pretty good idea, as they describe how the executioner has two large clubs on him that he clacks together in rhythm, and these clubs are made out of wood and metal. The humans are forced to attend the execution and watch, and the council looks on in pity while Urko is stone-faced the whole time. The fact that there's seemingly this whole ritual of the executioner rhythmically clacking together his clubs before he uses them, and how they get all these people together, and there's even a crier to be like, everyone get here, we're all watching the execution, This is easily the darkest thing I've read in honestly anything in a while, let alone the Planet of the Apes universe. Yeah, I'm not being hyperbolic here. The script is listed below. You can read it for yourself. It's something else. Because of this, Kemmer and Grayson, who is one of the UFF members who are on his side, decide that Laura should die in retaliation. A number of other members see this as going too far, while some members completely agree and go on his side. This causes Laura and Galen to be locked up and prepared for execution. Owen has to find a way to get them out of there. An important thing to note here is that this secondary base of theirs is actually located in an old military base, so there's actually some old weapons lying around. Obviously a lot of it's junk, but Alan is able to get a laser gun of all things to start somewhat functioning. I'm mentioning this because initially the idea is to get this laser gun working so they can eventually use it against the apes. But after everything that happens, Grayson steals this gun to use on Alan. Oh, right. Oh my god, I'm saying all this and I forgot that I mentioned romance. Okay, so while Alan is there in the base, he falls in love with a woman named Katrin, and they make out and they're totes in love. Also, Galen falls in love with Laura, and they're also both totes in love. So there you go, that's the romance part. Alan and Katrin are able to form a group and help Galen and Laura escape. While they're trying to escape, Grayson and Kemmer try to stop them with their new fancy laser gun, but they have no idea how it works and it ends up killing them. So after this, they make their way back to the council to show them that Laura is safe and to please for the love of God stop executing people. The council, keeping their side of the bargain, let everyone else go, which General Urko isn't too happy about because he is a murderous psychopath. Later that day, the group unfortunately have to part ways, but you have a good feeling that they'll see each other again. Pete, Alan, and Galen head off to their next adventure, which unfortunately we'll never know about. And now, let's take a look at that pilot episode that Rod Serling had wrote. In this version of events, we would have seen Pete and Alan searching for a missing crew of 5 people, and much like before, finding themselves on the planet of the Apes. Serling pulls no punches here, as they find the crew but they have all been long dead. They just find their skeletons still in the suits. They're fairly isolated in this instance, but do eventually come across Galen, who startles them, so they shoot him. He's not dead, but much like in the original movie, he's shot in the neck and can't speak now. They realize by his stature and actions that this ape is far more intelligent than they thought, and they help him heal up. While Galen, who they don't know has a name yet, is recovering, Pete and Alan are talking amongst themselves on what their next course of action should be. When they leave the ship to go try to find out more information, they come back to find it partially destroyed, and understandably think it is the ape that they just brought in. But it's not, it was the gorillas. In fact, this ape, Galen, had just tried to stop them. There's this whole scene described where, after Galen unsuccessfully tries to stop the gorillas from destroying the ship, he, in desperation, writes "I can speak" on the side of the ship in his own blood, in hopes that Pete and Alan will see it. And then it rains. Man, Rod Serling was cold. Thankfully, Galen is eventually able to communicate with them and explains what happened and give them his name. In the episode's B-plot, we see that General Urko is planning a coup against Dr. Zaius, which succeeds. And yes, General Urko is somehow more evil in this version of the series. The conclusion of this pilot would have seen Pete, Alan, and Galen working together to start a rebellion of the humans against Urko's new army. If you would like to learn more about all of this, I have linked the scripts below which you can read to your heart's content. It's great that somebody uploaded this stuff to the internet. I think it is an invaluable piece of media history. Thank you all for joining me in my look at the Planet of the Apes TV show. and I would love it if you joined me again when I talk about the newer trilogy in Part 5. If you enjoyed listening to a weird frog talk about talking apes for almost 2 hours, maybe like and subscribe or leave a comment below, that'd be swell. Either way, I just hope you had a good time. Have a great day. Bye.